What's up, what's up? It's Joey Blush Response, and welcome to the latest episode of the Sound and Structure Podcast. Today I'm talking to noise engineering. I forgot to put up the second angle, but it doesn't matter so much. Let's get right into it.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello. How's LA?
It's good. It's a little chilly by our standards, but good.
Okay. How many zombies have you killed in the apocalypse?
We live up. We're a little high up, so they don't come up the stairs to our house. We're good.
Okay, that's fair.
And we haven't really left the house.
Yeah, me neither. I haven't left this room. I've been watching Star Trek Discovery. It's really, really good. I don't know if you guys are into Star Trek, but I'm digging it.
We used to be. We haven't watched any of the newer things.
We pretty rarely watch.
I think Deep Space Nine was the last stuff we watched consistently.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
Mm. There's two new series. There's Picard, which is a direct sequel to that continuity, and then there's Discovery, which is kind of retconning some of the continuity, but in a good way.
I really want to see Picard.
It was cool. So I got questions for you guys about things relating to things.
Make sure that.
Tell me about Arturia.
They're this big synth company.
They're from France.
What? How did you guys work with them?
It was kind of a weird and awesome, just one of those weird moments where they came up to us at NAMM a couple years ago and said, hey, you want to collaborate? And we were pretty excited. We're like, yeah, I mean, it's Arturia. They were just a complete joy to work with. They were super friendly. And I mean, aside from all of the shit surrounding the apocalypse that went poorly because of, contracts getting lost in the mail and stupid things, they were just amazing. They were so much fun to work with. And, they're fans of our stuff. We're fans of their stuff. So it was a pretty trivial choice for us to work with them.
Why did you choose the 3 algorithms you chose for the Microfreak?
One of them, all of them were chosen primarily because of the constraints of the platform. The Microfreak does not have a gigantic, massive processor on it. So like a lot of the choices were made to try to find things that would sound cool, but not take a whole lot of processor power. The first one we did was this algorithm called the BAS algorithm, which is sort of like a wave shaping algorithm that I had just recently at the time read about in Electronotes, which are these sort of old journal for doing like electronic synth stuff. You can cut this gigantic pause.
No, we're leaving it in.
That's fine.
We're going to leave in every awkward pause.
Perfect. You just cut just only awkward pauses, I think, start.
Oh, that'll be the super cut.
Perfect interview, yeah. This is acting weird is why I'm wondering. So the next algorithm was based on saws, kind of like Armanus. Saws are really cheap to compute if you don't care too much about the quality, which it's recreating a perfect saw is not really the point of this. So it just combines a bunch of saws in different ways to make sounds it makes. And then the third mode is also just a simple additive mode, which also is just add a handful of things together and let you control essentially the frequencies of the things you're adding together, is kind of the premise of that. So, yep.
They asked for 2. We gave them 3, thinking that there was a possibility that the Microfreak wouldn't actually be able to run one of them, just computationally. But it was able to, and they actually really liked all 3 so much that they ended up buying all 3. We should probably pause and go deal with George.
Yeah. What kind of primate is that back there?
Primate?
The thing making noise.
Oh, that's George.
Also,
I'm in a funny mood today. What are your favorite 90s industrial albums?
Technical Neural Implant, Two Dark Park.
Does Bauhaus count as industrial? Because it's kind of.
That's goth rock, but it's still cool. Is it 90s though?
I listened to it into the 90s.
Okay, that's fair.
What else?
Yeah, I can think. Well, I mean,
we listened to a lot of Skinny Puppy.
yeah, I mean, Broken, Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite thing he ever did. Actually, that's not true. The Quake soundtrack is my favorite thing he ever did.
The Quake soundtrack is amazing.
Yep.
Yes.
Do you know about the secret? Sorry, do you know about the secret PV synth that Skinny Puppy used?
I don't think so. No.
PV made two synths. One is an FM synth, one is a sampler, and they used both, I believe. Check it out. The DPM something or other. It's really weird, and they don't talk about it.
Nobody talks about it.
Making note. Okay.
Yeah. You were onto something before, though, before I rudely interrupted.
Oh, we were just
talking about 90s
waxing poetic
stuff.
about 90s industrial and, well.
And me, I like late 90s, I became a big Autechre head. So it's not really industrial, but yeah.
It's totally industrial. It is industrial. It's more industrial than industrial.
Yeah.
I don't know. I listened to industrial, but I listened to a little bit of everything. Pretty Hate Machine was still better than Broken to me. Which I know most people disagree, but Pretty Hate Machine was pretty formative for me.
I like Pretty Hate Machine, but I don't know. Last is a pretty amazing achievement, and Happiness and Slavery. What is first on your list for next synthesis method to experiment with?
All of them.
Yeah, we have a lot. In particular, if you want to expand synthesis to include effects, because we're definitely focusing a lot on that right now. I mean, there's two things we talk about a lot that we want to do.
Sorry, my camera's gone out of focus. I'm weird.
Hello.
But there's this mythical banjo module, which
I've been wanting for years.
Which will be something along the lines of physical modeling-ish with a lot of probably weirdness thrown in. And then we wanted to do a filter that's based off of the actual vocal tracks of animals and the sort of models that have been developed to analyze and understand, bird calls and frog calls and stuff like that. Whale calls, yeah, even. Because there's a lot of really just interesting filtration, largely, and probably some oscillatory stuff that's pretty interesting. So a different sort of physical modeling.
There's not a ton of research on it because it's hard to do and it's extremely invasive. You typically have to kill the animal and force air through its larynx to really understand it. So people are understandably not thrilled to do the work. It's hard to do. It's expensive. But I've been able to pull some papers on it. So we're looking at it.
Have you guys considered human trials?
You volunteering?
Yeah. Not me. Physical modeling, though. I would assume you're aware of the Yamaha VL series.
Yeah. I don't think what we will do will be anything really as sophisticated as that stuff. But there's a whole lot of applicable techniques. I think the VL series uses waveguide modeling. I'm not sure. It's something that I've definitely been reading a lot about in the last few years. Yeah, I don't know. It's a cool synth, that's for sure.
They have some interesting stuff. There's also the VP1, which is another method. I got to play that once. I think there's only 3 of them. And then the EX5 unit has its own proprietary synthesis format called FDSP, which is something different altogether for key tracking based synthesis functions, as far as I remember. Doing stuff like simulating the sound of running water and all, which sounds really mundane, but it's really cool when you fuck with it. So running water module, please, guys.
Actually sounds pretty hard to simulate.
Yeah.
It's a pretty interesting thing. Might be worth looking into.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, Chris, when are you going to do an album?
It's not on the horizon. I'll just say that. I really like to fuck around with the sounds. But at the end of the day, like, recording an album is just not something that excites me.
But do you record sounds?
I do. I posted a jam a few weeks ago that was not really meant to be musical. It was just more like, so my case is pretty much always in a state of flux. I change it out just really regularly, and like often what I'll do is challenge myself to I'll put a load of things in that I'm like, these are not going to work well together, and I'm usually right. But what I try to do with a case like that is just find some interesting sounds that I wouldn't normally have gotten if I put together a case that I thought would be a fun case to actually play. And I usually will get fun sounds. And so the jam that I posted recently is exactly that. It's a bunch of stuff that I wouldn't normally think would go well together, but I got fun sounds that I don't think I would have gotten otherwise. If I play, like if I put a case together to play, it's going to be a really different case than what is in there on that jam. I'll put together something and jam on it for a bit, but I rarely will record it for posting somewhere, because that's just not really my motivating thing. Like I enjoy the fact that we make tools for people that make really cool music. I don't need to be the one making the music.
Well, if you record some exciting sounds and you feel like sharing with a friend, just send me a private link one day. I'm curious. And one for you, Steven. You do very long form jams. You haven't done a release since 2019. I personally would like to hear some more from you. When is that going to happen? Is that going to happen?
Yep. Yeah, we just whenever I have time to put it all together, put it all in the right format, upload it, type all the names in, generate random song names, all that.
How do you generate the random names?
I wrote a program that takes the mastered WAV file and essentially does a bunch of reverse hashes into just a dictionary to generate like random words that are deterministic based off of the content of the WAV file.
Oh my God, can I send you an album for that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can generate names for you. Absolutely.
Does that mean you have an album coming?
I have 2 albums coming. One is 11 tracks. One is going to be 7 or 8. The 7 or 8 one's like 80% done. But the other one is coming sometime soon this year. I'm just working it out with the label.
Awesome.
And the finer details of that. I could tell you about that later.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's missing from the noise engineering mixing system?
Well, a mixer.
What? Wasn't the Xeris Pola a mixer? Is that?
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
It was meant for like lunchbox kind of cases. Like there's only 3 inputs. It's mono.
Mono in, stereo out.
It has a headphone amp in it. So it's just made for like a little case you could put on your lap while you're on the couch. That was really the design. It wasn't meant for...
yeah, there's no send on it.
There's nothing sophisticated about it at all.
So like, a big thing would be a mixer would be really useful for a big case.
And we've only been working on that for like
5 years.
More than that.
I would like Well, we have a lot of things we're working on. The mixer is probably the biggest thing that's missing. And you could put together a passable 208, I would say, with what we currently have and a mixer. But there's a lot of other stuff that we're working on that will fill that out nicely.
I have an idea for a module that has never been done before. Would you like to collaborate? I'll tell you about it later. Or, I just thought of it now. But it has never been done before. So might be interesting. Yeah.
We always love to hear people's ideas, and sometimes we can do something with them and sometimes we can't. I mean, You are the inspiration for at least one of the Ruinas.
The Kith Ruina, for those who haven't watched or haven't read or known. I don't know if it was publicized, but that one was from me, guys. So thank you for doing that, by the way. I really enjoy it. It's fun.
Thanks.
I use it a lot.
Thanks.
It was in my live setup for quite a while. What do you find missing from the current state of Eurorack that you would like to bring to the table?
That's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we have a bunch of unique effects ideas that are going to come. I mean, we are releasing those every few months. Hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that.
I'd say that anytime we do an oscillator, our oscillators, really anything that we release, we try to put our own mark on it. A quad attenuator is a quad attenuator. There's only so exciting you can make that. But if we release something, we want it to be either really because it needs to be in our lineup or because it's got something unique that has our unique flavor to it. Like nobody else really sounds like the Manus. So new and interesting synthesis algorithms, I think, is one thing that we're
always interested in.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to do.
Yeah. I don't know what's missing writ large, though.
We have two modules coming out that and that have both actually been announced already that I feel address small lags. We're putting out a USB/MIDI to Eurorack interface that is much more flexible and much easier to configure than anything else that's out there. That's been delayed for so many reasons, and now we're in the middle of a bunch of part shortages, so we don't know exactly when that's going to cut out. And we also have a switch matrix that's essentially a sequential shift, a sequential switch, except for it has a whole lot more complexity to it, which is it's halfway between something like a completely configurable switch matrix and then a simple 1 to 4 sequential switch. You can get somewhere in the middle. So it's much smaller than, say, the actual matrix switches, because there's just so many possibilities. The module has to be huge to be able to allow you to pick them all. And then something very simple, like a really simple sequential switch. So
that sounds interesting. I like sequential switches. That's kind of the next level brain hacking stuff when you get into that.
Yeah, it's not always a beginner module.
No.
But they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've got
don't expect us to demo it anywhere at a show because
it's way too many cables.
You might just have to have one case that's set up as the sequential switch case.
Yeah. Under glass.
Under glass, so no one walks up and repatches it while you're at lunch.
Yeah. Or just have Marcus there with a taser, back off.
I'm sure they could do that.
Man. Okay. So say I am me, a man with zero knowledge of electrical engineering or DSP coding, and I want to start a fledgling modular company. What's a realistic timeline from today with zero knowledge to releasing my first module?
A few years at least.
That's why I haven't started.
Well, it depends. Are you planning to do it all yourself, or are you going to contract it out? There are several companies that will contract. Yeah, if you're willing to pay for it to be contracted, there are several companies that specialize in that.
Yeah, I feel like I would like to do it myself.
Yeah, then you got a few years.
Yeah. Oh, what a pain. That also ties into the question from my patron, Manu. How did you start, and what was your first personal milestone? And do you have any good tips for starting?
So, Stephen, you talk about how we started, because it was you.
Yeah, the genesis story of noise engineering. So I used to work in video games. I was a software engineer. My neighbor was one of the sound designers who I worked with. He got into modular and had bought a case, brought it into work. I had played with modular before. I actually had a roommate that had a pretty big Dofer system years before that even. But this was about the time when Make Noise was really getting hot, and just there are so many really interesting ideas coming out. So I would play with his modules and then critique them, basically, because that's what I want to do. And my friend got a little annoyed and basically was like, if you know so much about this, why don't you make me a module? So I did. That weekend I put the prototype together, which actually became eventually our first product, the Ataraxic Translatron.
Super cool one.
Yep. Yeah, it's discontinued at this point, but it's a lot of fun. It makes some really, really in-your-face sounds. It doesn't quite answer the question of like that's how I specifically started making modules. I actually built in high school. I spent a lot of time building electronics. I had kind of a mentor sort of person, and we just built circuits like all the time. And that sort of just practical knowledge and experience is pretty tough to beat. These days, there's an internet with a huge maker community, so I feel like the need for a mentor is a little less than when I was a kid, since there was no easily available resource to even find schematics of stuff.
We've collected a lot of the research. We get this question a lot. We've collected a lot of the resources that we found useful or find useful on our blog. We have a blog post about getting started in modular. So Manu, I would check that out. And one of the things that we suggest there is just try building shit. You'll fuck it up, but like just build shit and, start with inexpensive components and breadboarding things, and don't be afraid to make mistakes because you will, but that's how you learn.
The more you fuck up, the more you learn.
Boy, have
True
we
story.
melted some things. We've melted a lot of things, but we learn.
God, I almost melted my Emacs recently.
Ooh.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
Well, I didn't, thankfully. It works perfectly, but I was installing the floppy emulator and the plastic on the connector was slightly broken. So I connected the power backwards. But it turned out fine in the end. It didn't break anything except 3 flash drives when I stuck them in. I was like, why does it keep blowing these up? It was great. So that was fun, but it works fine now. How many sampler prototypes have you made?
None.
We have not made any. This is a long,
kind of a touchy subject. So as sort of an insight into how we make things, we're kind of a consensus building group. And we
Neo-socialist engineering.
Yeah, socialist engineering. That's right. We have a Friday meeting every week, and now we do it by Zoom. But when somebody has an idea for a module, it doesn't matter who it is in the company, and there's only 5 of us, but we bring it to the meeting, and we presented, and anybody can, we pick questions and poke at it and, argue it out. And 2-3 years ago, Stephen presented the idea for a sampler, and all of us were like, nah. And we all hated it, and we shot it down. And then it resurfaced a while ago, and we all hated it, and we shot it down. And last year it resurfaced, and we thought, oh, wait, there's something there. And we got really excited about it, and we talked about it, and then we all hated it, except for Stephen this whole time, and shot it down. And then just a few weeks ago, Norm, our newest employee, was just like, hey, what about a sampler? And we're all like, no, not again. And Stephen was very excited. And so Norm presented his first prototype idea of a sampler. These are all paper designs. And we think we've made progress. So maybe, so it's 2021. Look for that in 2024. We'll see. We haven't committed to anything. We argued a lot over Norm's initial design and sent him away to make a lot of changes. So we're waiting to argue again on that before we make any steps forward on it.
Let's do it now. What are the qualities you find important in a sampler?
It shouldn't suck.
Okay.
It should
What
be able to
determines
play back
suckage?
samples.
Fuck,
What?
really? You're blowing my mind.
Well, no. So seriously, one of the things that we believe is that it should have, as I was saying earlier, if we release something, we want it to have kind of a noise engineering spin to it. So there are a million samplers out there. So what are we going to add if it doesn't have a unique spin to it? Why should we just make another sampler just to make a sampler? So the question is, how do we make something that differentiates itself, that is unique and interesting, and will make people go, oh, hey, that's interesting. That's very noise engineering, and I want that over a different product.
I have the answer for you.
We can talk about that later.
Or right now, if you want.
I think I just had an idea. Fuck. I gotta hire a coder. I'm gonna do this, and then I'll get all the euro money that's there.
Oh, it's really bad money, let me tell you. It's not bad money.
Depends on the kind of panel you make. Why did you kill the perpetual repetitor?
Oh no, it's back to kill us.
Yes. Though the perpetual repetitor is dead as is, the concept actually is definitely not. And we've actually been working on firmware for some larger format sequencing ideas. That's all I'm going to say.
The perpetual repetitor would have never been something you wanted.
It was a starting point. And honestly, what I learned from that is that I needed to learn a lot more before we put a product like that out. That was the biggest lesson I learned from that one.
That and that people really like blinking lights.
Oh yeah, they do.
Can you talk about the feature set of it for those who haven't heard of it?
The original PR?
Yeah, what it was about.
It did way too much.
Yeah, it was basically a 4-channel pitch CV sequencer and then a 4-channel gate-only sequencer. You gonna grab it?
I am. It's right behind it.
Oh, exclusive content.
Yeah. The one of the problems is it actually kind of has too much output control for how much user interface input it has. It's very hard to actually edit a lot of the data. Here it comes. Ooh.
Can't really see.
Oh yeah, you're almost there. And I see a confundo functus as well.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks so cool. That's the thing.
Yeah, it looks cooler than It was really.
Yeah.
It's kind of the problem. It was just really klutzy to actually do the kind of things I wanted it to do. And we've been working on a lot of like multiple more ideas along this line for a long time. One of them, hopefully, we'll talk about by the end of this year publicly, but it's not there yet.
Do you prefer your sequencing deliberate or generative?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think yes is the answer. Like, you want to be able to say, I want my kick on this pattern, don't change it. And then you want to be able to be like, I would like probability or some sort of generated variation for some other parts. But you still want to be able to control that to some degree.
Yeah.
I do, and then there's like sort of randomness versus just numerical complexity. So one of the things I was playing a lot with lately, we released this module called Diffractio Solum, which is like you can multiply a clock in time by a fraction, basically. So you can generate a clock that's 2/3. Because of how just horrible the development of that module was for about 14 million different reasons, we had about 8 prototypes of it laying around, none of which actually fully worked, which means I get to put them in my case because I get all the half working modules to play
I want
with.
some too.
Yep, well, they're down here now. But it was really interesting to play with like 5 of these sort of fractional clock dividers, because you could very easily go from like, that sounds like complete randomness, and it's not. It's 100% deterministic, to like kind of varying shades of complexity just by changing a set of divisors. So anyway, that's a concept I'm very interested in.
That example you just described, are there any recordings of that on your release jams?
Yes, I think I'll send you a link.
There is. So I think there's at least a portion. As I said, I rarely release things, but I did do a jam on Data Cult like 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago. And it was 3 of the old prototypes for that module and 6 BIAs. And all I did was use Mimetic Digitalis to sequence my Fractio Solums, and then manually stepped through the different FS settings. And there are moments where it sounds completely disorganized, but it's like pre-programmed chaos. And so it's a really, really fun set.
That sounds cool.
So it happens when you have 6 BIAs at your disposal.
It's got to be quite a clangy cacophony.
It was awesome. I had so much fun with it.
I'm going to have to find that set.
Now that we got the DV, I really want to do it again.
Ooh. You should do 6 DVs in a feedback loop.
I've never actually done 2 even. That actually sounds like a lot of fun.
You'd be really modeless then.
Yeah, I mean, I've sat there and just played a DV for like 30 minutes before. Just you get it going. You put a couple sounds into it, yank the cable out, and just play with it. But DV into DV, that sounds pretty sweet. I'm gonna have to try that.
I'm very excited for mine to arrive, and also for my new backup audio interface to arrive. I don't think you were here, but I told Chris my audio interface died this week, like 2 days ago. After, so and I don't have a backup, so now it's coming. What a nightmare. Okay, back to sequencing. I feel that there's a lot of generative stuff in Eurorack in terms of like random, semi-random, and iteration on sequencing. But what I don't see a lot of is related sequencing. I'm not going to use the terminology right, but stuff like Markov chains, like if kick and snare hit, hats also hit. If kick, snare don't hit, hat doesn't hit. If hat does a roll, then snare hits 2 times. This kind of stuff. I don't see much of that. Have you considered tackling that? Is that something on your radar?
I mean, not specifically the way you've stated it. I mean, a lot of what you just described could be done with
Logic.
Sort of logic stuff, yeah. And I mean, like the confounded funkitis can sort of mixes logic and probability because you can do at least OR with it very easily.
It's really funkitis?
That's the way I've always pronounced it.
I mean, it's
whatever you want to call it.
There's really no wrong way to say these things.
It sounds like a disease. Like, I got funkitis. I got the funk.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
awesome.
the funk part is actually Aaron Funk, Venetian Snares, because he's the one who gave me that idea. And then I made it. I pronounce it like as if it's a disease, like you've caught funkitis.
Okay. Oh,
because I think that's funny. Maybe that's not funny.
No, it is funny.
Jokes. No, a lot of the names are jokes that only Steven finds funny.
This is true.
No, I think that's really funny. I'm just confused now because I always thought the T was first, and that must be my dyslexia. So, I got to look at the panel again. I always thought it was functious, and I was like, what is functious? Function? I don't know. Okay. Is there anything you find missing from digital audio recording software that you think could be improved?
I think this is probably a can of worms.
Yeah, that's a big, I mean...
I want you to orate at length.
Yeah. It's not really possible to have tried every DAW out there at this point. I mean, I feel like the sort of barrier to entry to make a basic DAW is so low that everybody is doing it.
Yeah.
And not necessarily succeeding, or perhaps succeeding for a very specific use case. I don't know. I mean, obviously from a modular perspective, flexible signal routing in a lot of DAWs is really lacking. There's a very much like you have a track and you can have MIDI notes on the track and that can talk to this one thing. There's a lot of sort of strictures about like how MIDI routing works, even just like something that's simple in a lot of DAWs.
A really simple one is just having modular interface with DAWs easily. Like Ableton made CV tools, but you can't specify the voltage range. So like you can't tune our oscillators, expect 0 to 8. But the CV tools is -5 to +5, I believe.
That sounds like a massive oversight.
Yeah, it does. And so like I've had Ableton reach out, like I've had customer service reps reach out to me from Ableton because like what, like my customers are having this problem, and I've had customers reach out to me. I'm like, yeah, that's Ableton. I can't solve Ableton's issue.
They need to add a drop down.
Yeah.
To the CV tools that selects what the tuning range of the oscillator you're talking to is.
But like on the other side, at least Ableton is thinking about it. And as far as I know, they're the only one, so like I don't mean to shit on Ableton. I'm really happy that Ableton's even thinking about modular.
I think Bibwig does it more.
Yeah, Bibwig does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're quite advanced with that.
Yeah. That's
they're definitely on the forefront of flexibility and sort of, I mean, almost patchability, I suppose. But yeah.
I flirted with Bitwig a bit.
CV tools. I would just like to see CV tools interface a little bit better. That's what I think is missing.
I think Reactor can do a lot of that.
I've never played with Reactor in that context.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The blocks format can connect. I never connect modular with computer like that, so I've never tried any shit.
Yeah. I wish Reactor could support native code plugins. We're really getting on the wish lists here.
By the way, if any of your audience has a good way around the CV tools issue, please drop us a line.
It's a good one. I'll make a pinned comment about that. Maybe I'll go down to the Ableton headquarters with a sign and picket them like, listen, fix your CV tools. Like,
I got another one. DAWs should have our oscillators.
Okay. Reason does.
Yeah. Well, and we are releasing the plugins. That was a pretty lame setup to talk about our plugins.
Tell me about your plugins, man.
Well, so as you mentioned, we are in Reason right now. We're going to at some point start releasing stuff in Reason again. We have started a plugin release with AX only. It's kind of a long and complicated story, but it was the easiest way for us to get to market. It allows us to do kind of a subset of tests up front. We can test out all of our back end on a smaller audience before we drop VSTs, et cetera, which are coming soon.
Working on it.
Yep. Everything is lined up. There's a lot of work happening, and in a few months, a few being very vague here, we should be able to have the plugins in every major format.
So all of you that are asking when the VSTs are coming, trust us, we want them out too.
Yeah.
As soon as we can.
Yep.
Are there any concepts that you feel are better done in software than in hardware?
I mean, software doesn't have the hardware limitations.
Yeah, it's very odd actually working on even taking like the Desmodus firmwares and making plugins out of them, which we've been doing. Like the hardware constraint when you're doing design is particularly the way, like we'd never have menus or any sort of like, sort of like you can make this knob do 4 different things. Kind of like that's just not, it's verboten in our design style book basically. But when you move into software, like knobs are cheap, right? You can add another knob, doesn't cost you anything. Whereas, you add another knob to a module, you have to make it 2 HP, 4 HP bigger. There are so many costs, price and size, when per knob in hardware. So our hardware designs are like very like narrowed down and focused, and we maximize every knob to try to really make it useful. And then now we go to software, and it's very different. So like
virtually infinite.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like a lot of plugins kind of do this to their detriment, because it's sort of like they give you all the options and they don't really kind of focus down like what's really useful and sort of try to concentrate the options. So our plugins actually come off a little strange in that universe because they are hardware products first and foremost. And they have a very simple interface, but all of the knobs do are really cool. But we are adding, as we do that, we are actually, there's just certain things where like, hey, this is a switch that actually could be a knob on this plugin, right? Because there's just 3 settings. That switch is just really taking 3 settings of a continuum. So then in the plugin version, we just map that to a knob or a slider, I suppose. So I don't know. I think we kind of digressed from your question a bit, but...
No, I think that was perfect.
Well, the other side of it too, though, is that you can then have, like, I played that set that I mentioned with 6 BIAs. Steven once did a set with 11 BIAs. And in hardware, I'm happy to sell you 6 BIAs, but, that's pretty fucking expensive, right? But in software, you buy one plugin and having 6 instances of the BIA running is trivial.
One of our testers had a session where they had 96 polyphonic instances of the PI.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
It's pretty ridiculous. Yeah.
In terms of... No, you go. Then I'll bring up the question.
Yeah, okay. It's weird, and this was really, when we first did the Reason plugins, it just... Like, it's the same synthesis code, like literally the same code at the heart of it. And you put it in Reason, and you put a different user interface on it, and you had polyphony, which is actually a big part of this. But and it feels actually quite different. Like, you can make the same single sounds very closely to what the hardware does, but then in a different context, you just play with it, and it just kind of takes you in a very different way than the hardware does. That's not good or bad. It's just, I find it very interesting that it feels different. Even the 5U, like playing with the 5U version of the Basimilus, like it just is, it feels different. Right? And it kind of makes me want to make different sounds with it. I don't know exactly why or how, but the whole subtleties of the interface are pretty important, I suppose.
There is actually one of the very first things that one of our testers said. He's a 5-year user of our hardware, but I sent him the plugins to test, and he said he loved them, and it immediately gave him new ideas.
Was it Tom Hall?
No, his name's Mike Bradford. But he's like, it just gives me so many ideas for using the hardware version.
So I had one question previously, but I just thought of another. So regarding the plugins versus the hardware versions, if I'm correct, your hardware oscillators have variable sample rates for changing the pitch. The software does not, so they inherently have to sound quite different. How did you do the pitch interpolation in the software versus the hardware?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally the software is running at variable sample rate, and I have to oversample it and then downsample it into whatever sample rate the DAW is running at. There is, if you listen closely in certain circumstances, you definitely get more inharmonic aliasing. You also don't get, like the hardware has just a ridiculous amount of high frequencies. Like this, the saws and squares will just cut your throat on the BIA. And it's not, you don't get quite that edge in the software, but I mean, you can't, like you just like fundamentally can't, like if you look at the effective sample rate of the BIA, it's like around 500 kilohertz if you want to think about it in terms of sort of frequency versus time domain. So like it's generating a pretty gigantic bandwidth, and some of it you can hear, some of it you can't. There's somewhat of a debate about whether sort of higher harmonics you can't detect individually can actually affect your perception of the other frequencies. But like just sheer bandwidth wise, the BIA is gigantic compared to what the plugins can do, just because your DAW doesn't run at 500 kilohertz sample rate.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, things would sound a lot better. You just need a hella computer to do it. Well, yeah. I mean, things would sound less aliased, I suppose, is really the biggest thing. Because
I read a
filtered down, but
I read a paper that I've seen a mastering engineer passing around that says that going at higher frequency rates like 96K or 192 actually creates more aliasing. And this guy was against it. I got to find it again, but it was quite an interesting thing. Like why I'm still relatively new to that.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it also depends on the specific like sort of synthesis and effect algorithms you're talking about.
I'd be curious, if you find the paper, would you send it to us?
Yeah, I will. I mean, he sent it to me like 10 years ago, I have to hit him up. But I always record at 48 just because.
Well, and was he talking about recording or running your session at? Because those are also two different things. He's probably correct if he's talking about recording at a lower sample rate, but if you then took a recording that was at like 48 kilohertz and put it into a 96K session and then processed it, I think you would get better results. But if you record at 96K, you're pulling in all sorts of ultrasonics, which then will alias if you run into an effect. So it is. I could see if that was the argument, that would make a lot of sense.
That might have actually been what it was. I have to find this paper again. 10 years ago. Fuck, now I forgot what the other question was. Oh, okay. Interfacing with software on a physical level. What do you think are ways that could improve that? Because your instruments are so direct. And I feel that that's a lot of the experience of them. How do you bring that to the software front?
That is a good question that I don't think we have an answer to. I mean, the mouse is such a limiting thing versus hardware, like that's, I mean, when right before the story I told earlier about where my friend Sean dared me or shamed me into making a module, maybe. Like I basically was just tired of being on my computer all the time, so I had started kind of building some stuff by hand again, just to be off the computer. And then that very much fed into my interest in modular, because you can make music with something that it kind of gives you a lot of the support structures that you can kind of get in a DAW environment, but then without a computer at all. And it's way more immediate and way more tactile, you know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the computer will ever be quite as tactile as a real piece of hardware. I mean, you can always make a piece of hardware that's just an interface to the computer, but that, you know, has its own set of annoyances. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that.
I think a lot of our users, at least, are still Eurorack people that want the software for specific use cases. You know, like you're going on a tour, and you know, you especially know how hard it is to travel with this shit. You know, like it's heavy and it's expensive to travel with. You know, if you could travel with your laptop, that's a lot lighter. It's a lot easier to move around with, right? So if you have the plug-in version of it, it's not as tactile, but you know, you at least have something that's pretty easy to travel with. It's recallable, so you can just set up, you know, open up your session and you've got your set. You don't have to worry about it getting unpatched at the airport because somebody thinks it's a bomb. All of that sort of thing. So, I know, I think it's not, I agree with Stephen. I'm not sure we'll ever make it as tactile, but you know, it's also a really useful tool for a lot of people, even if they are Eurorack people.
Have you seen the software Music Mouse? Oh. I think it was Laurie Spiegel who designed it, Music Mouse. But basically, it's the mouse on an XY plane, and it has musical scaling and also a type of parameter attached to it based on where your mouse is on screen. And it's very intuitive. It's the best thing I've seen for a mouse. Might be worth checking out. Relating to touring. Sorry, go ahead.
Someday, this is probably a long time in the future, I would love to do something on tablets, because I feel like that there's a kind of a halfway point between a mouse and a physical interface there with the touch interface. I have no idea what that's going to look like, or, you know, obviously we haven't even vaguely started that, which, but like, I feel like that's actually a pretty interesting midpoint, because you can get multi-dimensional control like very quickly and easily with it, which is at least an interesting step forward. It's actually kind of unique. I mean, there's not really many multiple dimensional controls in modular either. Yeah. So that's actually kind of interesting.
The Haken continuum is physically multiple dimensional. It's quite awesome.
I have a instrument actually, which is sort of three-dimensional. It's not really quite that, but it's actually a lot of fun.
It looks really cool. I mean, Roger Lynn's a genius. So,
what were you going to say about touring?
Yes, you mentioned touring before, and the ease of bringing a laptop. And in my experience, bringing a laptop is easy if you don't want to perform. And what I mean by that is, if I look at my live case, which is just 2 rows, 2A HP, I have 70 knobs there, roughly. Bringing a 70 knob controller, computer, and an audio interface is actually more shit. And it's harder to set up because you have to make custom templates. You have to rely on 3 devices failing versus 1, etc. I find that, especially because my live case is filled with your stuff, it's very performable. And I'm not just saying that because we're on this call. Like, really, that is really missing from the laptop thing. And I thought about doing the laptop thing because I was lazy. I was like, fuck it, it's just too much to carry. But no, this simplifies it in a way. So thanks for that.
I mean, I will also throw out there that as an audience member, I'd much rather watch somebody that has the case Like we've been to shows where somebody just stands behind the laptop, and hits go, and it's just like, cool. Could have just sat at home and turned up the speakers really loud.
Right? Yeah.
And gotten cheaper drinks.
Yeah, not had people stepping on me. So, you know, I there's a lot to be said for both of these approaches, I think, is really what I'm going for. Like, I think I appreciate the people that want to actually perform. But I also appreciate the need to not carry a shit ton of gear and, you know, worry about that gear failing, being stolen, being broken, having some dipshit drop a glass of beer on it or whatever, you know. What, did you do that to yourself?
No, but once I was playing, I think in Portland, and someone jumped on the stage and was trying to like make a fool of himself and get attention. So I poured beer on him, and it landed on someone else's gear, and that was pretty rough. Yeah, but the gear was okay.
That's good.
Yeah. But yeah, gear getting lost sucks.
Yeah.
But I think, like, just to summarize or really generalize what we've been sort of talking around in some sense, it's like we look at the bigger picture of us, say, moving into plugins, is that we want as many different people and as many different use cases and as many different, you know, like what they need to do with the sounds that our stuff makes to be able to do that in whatever format, or, you know, if they want your rack, fine, if the plugin's fine. We're definitely looking at as many possible formats that our stuff makes sense in. I mean, we have 5U right now as well. And Reason, I suppose, kind of separate from plugins too. So we definitely want to be wherever someone needs us to be to use our sounds, you know. And we're definitely spending, I mean, the plugins are spending a lot of time making that happen. So
I think that's a great approach. Something for everyone. And I feel that you guys have a very unique sound, because there's a lot of digital stuff, but your sound is quite signature, and there's a lot of range within the signature. I think the Lequelic is going to be like the next 303, personally, the Percedo version. That's what I think. It's very playable and satisfying in the same way that something like a 303 has kept people entertained for decades now. Branching off of that, what are the decisions you make in choosing the unique wave folder design in each oscillator?
All the wave folders are the same.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
No, it's all, I mean, one of the, like, I guess, sort of generally answer, I suppose that's true. The AI is different, but it,
same concept.
Yeah. And I think to generalize your question is, why do the folders sound so different between the oscillators? Maybe.
I totally thought they were different. Wow.
Yep. That's just because of the input to the wave folder. Like, the wave folder is actually a very simple thing, but it reacts. And one of the just amazing things about wave folders is how dynamic and complicated its reaction is to different sounds. So with the exception of the soft fold on the AI, all of the wave folders are the same. And so all of the differences you're hearing are just the input waveform to the wave folder.
Mm. Well, there you go. I'm not the expert anymore.
Well, and what's interesting about the AI wave folder is it's actually not like a wave folder, like folds waves. Like, it's a pretty harsh, like, flips over the wave every now and then. So you get these like really sharp edges all over the place. The problem with AI was the input tones are sort of so harsh already that, like, folding them again was just making, you know, something edgy and noisy into just noise.
Too much action.
So that one, the wave folder is actually just a polynomial shaper that causes, instead of it causing it to like go up and down like this, it actually kind of smoothly folds it, I guess. Because the normal wave folder we use was just, it was harsh on harsh, which just doesn't work. Like,
the wave bender.
Yeah, so wave bender. It's also asymmetric. It only affects one side of the waveform. So you always have half your waveform that's the same, which just also helps make it not destroy it as much, because the AI makes such ridiculously harsh tones when you have the knobs up. Yeah. And so I was having a lot of problem getting the wave folder to actually react well with it being our normal folder. So I had to kind of back it up. I mean, that's actually a lot of that technique. Like, hey, if you smashed it to hell and you smash it more, it doesn't change, right? Like, it's a pretty. If you run it through 10 distortion pedals, it doesn't really sound that different from running it through 5. Like,
hey, that's not true.
It does depend on the pedal, but it's less to do with the distortion and more to do with the EQ in the pedal. But yes,
agreed.
But like on the Manus, there's the smash knob, and I had a similar problem with that. There's a cool distortion effect, but particularly like the last half of it was just noise to noise. And it was, as you distort something more and more, particularly something like a wave folder that's actually removing lower frequencies and kind of shifting your harmonics up, you lose the bottom end and you lose kind of the power of the sound. And so like on the Manus, we actually start adding subharmonics in as the distortion goes up. So as you get it more and more distorted, it adds subharmonics of the fundamental to give you a more of that bass power sound, except for it's actually even lower than the fundamental. And there's a bunch of our oscillators that do something along those lines now, and even effects that use a similar technique, because you fold something, you smash something until it's just noise, and then it just is like, psh, and it's not, like there's no power there anymore, there's no music there anymore. Like, it might be an interesting noise, but like it definitely doesn't work as like a note anymore.
So you did the Basimilus Alter, which was a great revision.
It displays my ignorance of Eurorack. That is what that is. The BIA was definitely a learning lesson. Or the difference between the BIA and BIA is actually, software-wise, it's not very different, and it's mostly just some kind of interface changes. And then the pitch envelope.
But I want to touch on, like, you did that revision, it came out well. Are there any in your current lineup that you have more ideas for, and are you more prone to want to work on new stuff or revisit the old ones to make them better?
We almost entirely work on new stuff. We have a general, so we did the version 2 of the BIA. We added a sync jack to the Laquelic. So there's a Mark 1 and a Mark 2 of the Laquelic that exist. There are only a few of the original May few hundred.
I had one of those.
Without the sync jack. But after that, we've tried very hard to avoid making version 1 and version 2. And largely it's because we kind of feel like it punishes the early adopters. And it screws retailers who are stuck with the stock of the first version when the second version comes out. And I'm really protective of our retailers who do a really great job for us. And we really appreciate what they do. But beyond that, and more to the point, we have like at least 20 things that we're working on at any given time, at least, and way more ideas. So like I would way rather just be working on new shit, because we've got so many things that we want to do and there's not enough hours in the day to get those done.
Yep. And to answer your question specifically, yes, we think about new ways to work old things all of the time. Sometimes, for instance, I believe this podcast show, I'm not quite sure what to call what we're on, but we'll come out after our next firmware for the Versio hardware comes out, and it actually internally sort of has two digital now rethinks of two of the arenas we put out in the past. Like they're not the same at all, but like algorithmically, like they are doing the same thing, except for with a couple years hindsight and then mapped to a very different interface. And then also digital, not analog. There's a lot of differences, but
they're so similar.
Right. In terms of like using things we've learned about modules we've put out in future modules, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
And just bits of software and techniques, particularly on the Versio, as we're putting out more and more firmwares, there's more and more code that we've developed that then we reuse in the next one, which is, it's pretty normal development, but like we definitely reuse and enhance things that we've done in the past. And
hardware and firmware.
Yep.
What's your favorite distortion pedal?
That's a tough one.
Pedal?
I mean, I think of, particularly these days, the way I think about distortion pedals is sort of almost like algorithmically, and I find them interesting when they do interesting things.
They are analog algorithms in a way.
Yeah, no, they are. Yeah, absolutely. And there's just like, you look at I love looking at distortion schematics because, I've looked at way too many of them at this point in my life. But it's just always interesting to see what choices they make. And they're like, oh, they're going to do a little, mid boost here before running into that distortion. Or, oh, they're going to shift the phase here before clipping it or whatever. Like there's just a bunch of, I don't know. They're really interesting choices. Man, I just looked at a pedal recently that had so many interesting choices in it.
Which was that? It must not have been that interesting.
No, it's really interesting. I just am not great with names.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just messing.
I could find it again. But
Did you see the Metal Zone 5G thing?
No.
Oh yeah, there were people, 5G conspiracy people that were passing around some kind of schematic for the brainwave manipulation, but it was just the Metal Zone pedal.
Yep.
Huh?
Yep. Yeah. I guess like my favorite, I like the funky transistor distortions that are super simple. And like, use an awful germanium transistor and like they sound great and they do weird things. And then I just like ones that make interesting choices is the way I look at it.
This is the part where I admit that I don't love distortion.
And you work at noise engineering.
You like it when it's very controlled and more harmonic.
Yeah.
So you like things like octavizers, like the Pure Arena.
I love the Pure Arena. That is one of my favorite modules we've ever done. It's not a pedal, but it is one of my favorite modules we've ever done.
Go ahead.
The core of the Pure Arena, like there are octavizer pedals. It's kind of a horrible word to say, but Pure Arena is basically three of those in a row and a way to mix them up. The concept is really simple. And
it just sounds so
great.
Cool.
Yeah.
And like you can make a sine wave sound polyphonic with it. It's just so much fun. I
have not tried that one.
You should.
I like to try everything you guys got, but COVID killed all my dreams.
Yeah.
What is your favorite 90s rack reverb, and did it have any influence on the Desmodus?
Sorta. Maybe not 90s, but
80s, 90s, 70s.
So back in around 2000, really, I started playing in this sort of like live improv ambient band. All those words don't fit together, but it's me and a friend of mine.
They totally fit together, dude.
Yeah. But we would like play, or like he liked to collect the 60 millimeter documentary films, like of my age that we watched in like elementary school with the actual film projector. And so he would basically play those, and we'd do like an hour-long ambient set to educational videos. That was kind of the original premise. It kind of changed a little later on. But one of the things I would do in that setup, I had Alan Heath Zone 62, I believe. But it was a mixer that had a DJ mixer, but it had a filter in it. And I would run and sends. But I'd run out of the send into a Lexicon Reverb. Like at some point, Lexicon made like the single unit super cheap reverb, but actually had like a lot of the classic Lexicon algorithms in it, but it was like $200.
Is that the MPX or the Alex or the?
It's one of those. Yeah, I can figure out the exact model. I don't have it anymore. But then I run that into just the Alesis, like the Alesis analog compressor that you see everywhere.
3630.
Yeah, 3630. Yep. So I'd run the reverb into the 3630 and just max out the 3630 is basically like all gain, all limit. So I could get like reverb tails that just like didn't die ever. And had no dynamics, right? It was just the tone. Like you could pull, and then I'd run that back into the mixer and filter that. Basically, it was one of my sort of core mechanics in that set. And so like that technique of like wanting a reverb that was not dynamic and was really tone based off of sort of the input definitely affected the way Des Modus came out. What's interesting is I didn't realize it in how that had influenced me until my friend Sean told me that, hey, that technique you told me about used to do with the reverb and the compressor, this is totally what Des Modus is about. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right.
That's cool.
So like that sort of experience definitely it affected Des Modus, just that making that music.
That's cool. Have you guys heard of Thomas DiMuzio?
Nope.
He's a really cool experimental synthesis explorer. He done a lot of stuff over the years. He does stuff with a Buchla now. It's quite cool stuff. You should check it out. But anyway, there's a video of him from around 2009 where he's discussing his rig pre-modular, and he has a Lexicon Reverb, a PCM 70, I believe, with a Kurzweil K2500, and he has the Lexicon in some sort of feedback loop that he's using it as an oscillator with pitch control and everything. It sounds quite similar to what you were doing. So
cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, I definitely like the classic Lexicon stuff. I mean, I'd never owned like the what is it, 224? The one that's a giant box and a little white control panel.
There are two of those.
The algorithms in them, or at least one of them, in software. So or something
cool.
Very close to it. I love. I mean, we were talking about like distortion algorithms. Like this is a whole other level of weird appreciation is what reverbs do to generate their sounds, because it's largely just magic and weird. Like it's very odd that certain things work and certain don't. It's really I don't know. It's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any sort of modulation-based effects you really enjoy?
I mean, ring mod's cool.
I meant more like chorus, phaser, flange.
Right. Oh yeah.
Any you're partial to?
I mean, I like all of them. I love the classic Roland 1-2 chorus on like the Juno 6, and I mean it's on a bunch of products. We have kind of a chorus derived from that on the 6 HP oscillator we showed at the last NAMM, the Vert Iter, which is actually related to the Arturia stuff. It's similar algorithms, but it has a chorus that's kind of based off of the old school Roland choruses, which are really actually just, once again, the analog algorithm they use, I suppose, is hybrid, but it's really fascinating because it actually shifts. It's basically two pitch shifters that are always offset the same amount from the bass frequency, but then they cross and they're going up and down in pitch. So it's always continuous. You never get a tick or something as it's changing the frequency, because there's essentially two different frequencies that end up crossing at the same point as they go up and down again. It's really neat stuff. It's really simple. I mean, it works fantastically well.
I have to check that out. I think I'm all out of questions.
I don't know if they ever made that as a standalone. Like, I think the Juno 6 had it, like kind of that era of Roland that had the off 1-2 button chorus selection. It has this, but I don't know of a way you could just hear it.
I mean, I had the 106.
Okay.
So I know the vibe, but I know that the 60 and I think the 6 as well had another mode if you pressed 1 and 2 at the same time.
Yeah.
It's not in the 106.
Yep.
TC Electronic makes some Juno chorus pedal, but apparently it doesn't sound at all like the real thing. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having us. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nerd out.
Thanks to everybody for watching.
Yes, we'll nerd out again soon.
For sure.
I think I just had a stroke from all that. So, peace.
Nice.
Take care.
So that was really inspiring for me. I get a lot of influence from the stuff noise engineering makes, and to be able to communicate with them and sort of create this feedback loop of they make this stuff, I use the stuff, I report back with my findings to help them make new stuff, and back and forth is really, really cool. It's a special thing, and they make special modules. If you want to know who's coming up next on my podcast and submit questions for them, you can do that by subscribing to my Patreon. Don't forget to smash like and subscribe here. Peace out.